Good morning, and thank you for joining. My name is Daniel Duchamp. I'm the budget manager for Cochise County. So we put together this series of webinars to meet some internal professional development needs, give employees a better understanding of the budgeting process and how our government operations are paid for. And with things going on right now, we're all focused in talking about the COVID thing, the stimulus money coming down, changes in state and local revenue. I thought it would be a great opportunity to open this up to the public and any members of the community that really want to have a better understanding of where our finances come from. So with that, let's get started. Some general info, you should have the question and answer chat box there, and you can submit questions anytime. And I'll answer those as we get along or jump from topic to topic. So feel free to chime in anytime you like. The schedule of all the topics will be published by date. I know some of you may only be interested in certain things like the property taxes or special districts or things like that. So we do have a schedule, some guest speakers, May 29th, that's today. June 5th, we'll have the Deputy Director from the Joint Legislative Budget Committee up there in Phoenix at the state legislature. So that'll be a good snapshot in the state budgeting process. June 12th, we'll have Dr. Hammond from the University of Arizona Economic and Business Research Center. He'll talk to us about local economic conditions and changes to the economy we're all hearing about right now. June 19th, we will have somebody from PSPRS, the Public Safety Retirement System, talk about public pensions and retirement systems and what's going on with those now. And June 26th, we'll have the Assistant City Manager, Victoria Yarbrough from Sierra Vista, our partner there, talk about government IGAs, what's going on with Sierra Vista, their budget process, what are they looking at for the next year. July 3rd, no webinar, we'll be enjoying the holiday. And on the 10th, we'll have the final class and we'll have County Administrator Ed Gilligan on that day as well. And I will publish a more concrete schedule with the topics because we're also going to talk about local government economics, state budget types and history of budgets, government accounting, local government funds, the math behind property taxes, theory of taxation, and special districts. So we'll get those posted as well. And there is my email as well. So if you have any questions in general or you're trying to find a document for your town or city or county budget, shoot me an email and I can help you out. All right, today, before we really get into the meat of the budget, we kind of need to talk about some other topics that lays the framework for what we do. So that's going to be federalism, local government structures, fiscal federalism, where the budget comes in, and some local government economics. So before we can start talking about budgeting, we need to understand what we're budgeting for, why we can do that, and why we have the authority to do such. All right, federalism and local government. So we hear about federalism and we always think the push and pull between the state and federal government. But there's another layer to that, and that's the push and pull between the state and the local government. So what gives states or counties authorities to provide services? What gives cities or counties authorities to exist? Let's look at the US Constitution. Amendment 9. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So we call the enumeration clause. So rights not listed, rights not enumerated in the Constitution doesn't mean they don't exist. So one of those rights may be the right to form a city, right to form a county. 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So again, those rights that we have that aren't given to the United States federal government in the Constitution are reserved to the states. But there's a really important or in there. It's the states or the people. So I want us to remember that or. So what we have is the U.S. Constitution allows cities and counties to exist because of the enumeration clause. And the U.S. Constitution allows states to govern those cities and counties because it's not delegated to the federal government, thereby reserved to the states. Okay, two clauses, states respectively or the people. So this is where it gets deep here. Federalism and local government. How much authority does the state have over the cities and counties? There's two schools of thoughts. There's a Dillon rule and the home rule. The Dillon rule is a strict interpretation giving more authority to the states. The home rule provides more authority to the people, the local cities and counties. If I go back, we have these two schools of thought because in Amendment 10 in the Constitution, they put this or there. I'm working on my Microsoft Teams here, so I've got the highlighter. All right, so that's an important or, and that's why we have these two schools of thought. You notice on this diagram, Arizona's in the middle. Arizona has both. So let's go into this a little bit more. The Dillon rule. It originated in the 19th century out of the Iowa Supreme Court, and it being a strict interpretation, I quote, municipal corporations owe their origin to and derive their powers and rights wholly from the legislature. It breathes into them the breath of life without which it cannot exist. So the Dillon rule is a very strict interpretation saying that cities and counties exist at the sole discretion of the state legislature. It's even more vehemently stated, municipalities are mere tenants at will of their respective state legislatures, which could be eliminated by the legislature with the stroke of a pen. So that's a very harsh statement that says cities and towns exist because the legislature says so and continues to let them exist. So what are the pros to this type of strict interpretation? It provides uniformity across the state. For example, things like criminal code. When I go from Sierra Vista up to Payson, there's not different definitions of crimes. Our motor vehicle code, the maximum speed limit doesn't change depending on what county I'm in. The radius on an engineered turn on the highway doesn't change if I'm in Cochise County or Pinal County. Health and safety. So if you get a restaurant inspection in Douglas, it's the same standards if you get a restaurant inspection up in Flagstaff. And taxation. We can't have Douglas making their own rules for taxes and Nogales doing the opposite. We'll get into taxation and that type of horizontal fiscal policy. So the home rule, what's that mean? Well, let's think of the Federalist Papers, our founding fathers. Government closest to the people best serves the people. Or our good friend Alexander Hamilton. It is a known fact in human nature that its affections are commonly weak in proportion to the distance or diffusiveness of the object. Upon the same principle that man is more attached to his family than to his neighborhood than to the community at large, and then to the people of each state are apt to feel a stronger bias towards their local governments than towards the government of the Union. So we inherently feel closer to our local government. And as we go on, we'll see the local government provides most of those over-the-counter customer direct services to us. So by contrast, the home rule, which is also called the Cooley Doctrine, it's an inherent right to local self-determination. So local government is a matter of absolute right and the state cannot take it away. So there's our two different schools of thought, and Arizona is a combination of both. Arizona, your home rule cities are those over population of 3,500, but also has a Dillon rule as it sees fit. So what happens is we have a mess of both right now, and some good examples to see how it's applied. Do we remember in 2014, Oro Valley buys 36 holes of golf? I like golf, but it's not an inherent government function. It's not a core government service. Well, the Arizona legislature applied the home rule. You guys want to open some golf courses? Cool. We're busy running the state. We don't care. What about my favorite thing in Sierra Vista, the wave pool? It's cool, but it's not a core government service. So was it 2005? Sierra Vista opens the Cove with a wave pool. Arizona legislature, they're pretty mum on it. Pools are cool, right? Home rule. Bisbee, who's been on the Copper Queen mine tour. That is actually a city-owned enterprise. It's a city business. Again, mine tour is super cool, but is it a core government service? No. But the legislature applied the home rule. You guys want to open a tour of a mine? Sure, go ahead. Do whatever you want. What about when Bisbee wants to ban plastic bags? Whoa, slow down. That sounds like a California policy here. I think we need to step in and apply the Dillon rule. And we saw the state legislature and the attorney general say, no, you can't do that. Dillon rule, sorry. So with that, there was some differing legal opinions, and Bisbee chose not to fight that in court. But that shows that there is some gray area to this. So in Arizona, we do have the Dillon rule and the home rule, and they're applied differently. The most recent example, which it was a good example, with the COVID-19 stay-at-home orders. Governor Ducey came down and said, okay, here's a stay-at-home order. And no, the cities and counties aren't making their own. I'm not going to have one rule in Payson and another rule in Show Low. This is it. Dillon rule. This is what we're going with. And in that case, it's a very good example of where you need this concerted statewide rule. Just a couple other notes. This kind of mirrors the term, what you've heard is like a charter city, where charter cities have more authority over issues of local control. It mirrors and parallels this process as well. So when you think of a charter city, think home rule, or other cities, think Dillon rule. It's not an exact parallel, but think about that as well. Across the country, 44 states have home rule of some sort, and many are a mix, like Arizona, where there's both. Do feel free to chime in with the questions if I'm going too fast or it's getting a little too dense. Let me know. Okay, so now we've talked about the state local push and pull. Let's keep bringing it down, ratcheting. Our local government structures. There's two major local government structures, and we'll see where the budget fits in these later. On the left, you have your council mayor, which you may hear a strong mayor. And right now, the only mayor in public mind right now may be Mayor Pete from South Bend, Indiana. He's a strong mayor. So that means if you look at this, the voters elect your city council and your mayor. But the mayor has the departments underneath him reporting to him. So in a strong mayor, in a mayor-council form of government, the mayor has executive authority over the departments. So the mayor has a vote on city council and it has executive authority. The other type, which we're seeing is much more common, is what we call a council manager form of government, or a weak mayor, where the mayor is just another vote on city council, and they may have some ceremonial or ministerial authorities, like looking at the agenda or appointing boards and commission members. So in this, the voters on the right side vote in the city council and mayor, and they have policy authority and appointing authority, and they appoint a manager or administrator. This is what we call a professional administrator, and that professional administrator manages the day-to-day operations of the department. So in this case, the mayor doesn't come in and do hiring or firing or recruiting or payroll or anything like that. This form of government, the council manager, is probably your most popular in the United States right now. It came about in the 20th century, and it came from the need for professional managerial and administrator needs of the organization. And really key is this is the key tenet of a manager or administrator is they should be non-political or apolitical. So the mayor and council wouldn't pick a Democrat or a Republican administrator. It'd be a neutral, apolitical party. All right, so what does this look like here for Cochise County? Right here, here's an org chart of Cochise County. Up on the top, go to the laser pointer, see how it works. We got our Cochise County residents here, and they vote in our supervisors. So in the city, you have a city council. In the county, you have your board of supervisors. Our 3 supervisors are voted in by the residents, and they appoint a county administrator who then manages the day-to-day activities of the organization, which is the hiring, firing, payroll, HR. They execute the board's direction. And there are other positions, like the clerk of the board is also appointed by the board of supervisors, and there's a loose managerial tie here. So in this sense, we could glean that, okay, the clerk of the board doesn't answer to the county administrator. But wait, there's more. So unlike a city, county is going to have elected officials in executive positions managing departments. So on the left here is our judicial system. And there's the gray are elected. So we have an elected presiding judge, elected superior court judge, and elected justice of the peace judges. So those positions are elected. They're not appointed, they don't report to the county manager. Here in the middle, we have the same org chart we saw before, where the board of supervisors appoints a county administrator, and the county administrator manages the day-to-day operations of these parts of the organization. On the right, this is more elected officials. Your assessor, your attorney, your constable, your recorder, your school superintendent, your sheriff, your treasurer. They're elected by the residents. So they don't per se answer to the county administrator or the board of supervisors. What you have is a push-pull based on statutory authority of the board over the administrator they appoint, and some statutory authorities over the elected officials. But where does this come in? The strongest statutory authority over the elected officials is the budget. The board of supervisors here has the authority and the right to build that budget for the elected officials. So that's really how they, I don't want to say control, but manage. So the board does have the budget authority over all these. So that's what makes it important in this org chart with the push and pull. Just like we talked with the federal government, push and pull between the federal government and the states, push and pull between the state and local governments. And here within our organization, there's push and pull between the board of supervisors and the elected officials. And the main mechanism for that is the budget. All right, now it's going to get deep here. So we've talked about state, federal, local push and pull with the organizational structure. So how does that come into play with the budget? What we call fiscal federalism is what fiscal or budgetary, what money things do the different levels of government do, and who does them and why? So there's 3 goals of a government as far as fiscal priorities. Stabilization, that's keeping the economy going. That's your federal government right here up on the top. So your federal government stabilizes the economy with monetary policy. The state and local governments don't set interest rates or do quantitative easing. That's solely the responsibility of the federal government. Okay, next we do redistribution. What does that mean? We take from the rich and give to the poor. So it's a redistribution. The federal government taxes and then redistributes that through Social Security, Medicare, welfare, and education. The state government taxes and then redistributes that money in K-12 education, Medicaid, welfare, unemployment, things like that. Now, local governments, they don't do redistribution. City of Sierra Vista or Cochise County wouldn't tax and then redistribute that to different programs or people. What you see at the local level is mostly our local level does allocation. So allocation of government services, fiscally speaking, is providing the services. So the federal level, the federal government, you don't normally go up to the federal government building and go get counter service or this or that. The federal government provides overarching large things like national defense or the EPA. What about the state? The state provides some direct services, like higher education is a direct allocation of service to customers at our state universities. Transportation is our state highway system, and even your prisons could be viewed as that. But mostly, what you're going to see at the local level is an allocation. Most allocations take place at the local level, and that is really our police, fire, hospitals, water, sewer, public health, things like that. The things we receive as direct services come from our local governments. A couple examples, like we have an emergency management department. Well, that is paid for partially by the federal government. So federal government taxes up here, but they don't provide local emergency management services. They have FEMA, but that service is passed down through a grant from the federal government to the local government. So we joke about the size of the federal government. Well, in reality, they've chosen in this instance to not have an extra 15 employees at FEMA in Arizona. What they do is they push that money down to the local level so that we can decide how to do that locally. It's just like the quote we said a few slides ago, government closest to the people can best serve the people. So what you'll see is grants will come down from the state for the health department, for immunizations, for the women, infant, children program. The state doesn't want to manage those because they know our local health department knows best how to meet, or each local health department knows best how to meet those needs. So this is kind of what federalism representation of what we do with fiscal policy and how we pay for things. And when we get into taxation, you're going to see that when we talk about the federal government federal and state government doing redistribution, their tax bases actually match the type of service they provide. So there's some other push and pulls in here as well. I've got the blue arrows on the side and the bottom. So what does that mean? There's push and pull vertically between the different levels of government. That comes with the authority to spend and the authority to collect revenue. So who gives us local governments the authority to spend? That's the state government. Who gives the state government the authority to tax? That's the federal government. And then along with that authority to generate revenue, they have the authority to spend. So what happens is you can get these, it's a push and pull, but you can get imbalances when the authority to generate revenue isn't paired with the authority to spend. So what we see, we hear is things like the unfunded mandates. So the state says, counties, cities, you can only generate revenue in this way. Oh, by the way, here's an unfunded mandate. Here's a new law that you must do. You must now provide this service, but we aren't letting you change the rules on revenue. So there's a mismatch between the expenses that are now mandated and the revenues that are limited. Another thing we hear about is state cost shifts. So maybe 8-10 years ago, the state, when the economy was tough, said, well, we're going to do a state cost shift. And in layman's term, that means the state says, because we write the rules, we're going to make the counties pay for more things. So that was like the Arizona Department of Revenue that collects your sales tax. Well, they go, because we operate the Arizona Department of Revenue and we write the law, we think we should get paid for it. So what they started doing is charging the counties and cities to collect their tax revenue. That didn't happen 15 years ago. So what you're getting is they're pushing a cost on us but not letting us generate more revenue by changing the revenue rules. So that's what you call a vertical imbalance, this push and pull between the state and local government, where your revenue authority and your expense authority isn't matched. Another one we talk about limits on revenues is the expenditure limits. Let's say there's rules for your sales tax. There's rules for your property tax assessment. There's rules for your property tax rate. There's rules for your property tax levy. And we'll have probably a whole class on property taxes. But as a county or city, you can follow every single one of those rules. But if you have a real banner year and generate too much money, the state is then going to come down and say, oh, you also have an expenditure limit. You're only allowed to spend so much. So when there is not enough, when there's caps on the revenue, there's also caps on the expenses. We just need to make sure that they're balanced, because if they get unbalanced, we get in a situation where we need to pay for something, but we don't have the ability to. The other line we could talk about is a horizontal imbalance or a push and pull or inequity, and that is where a different across the country of different states have different rules on taxation, which they do within reason. But if it was too great, where maybe one state had too high taxes and the other has too low, you'll see people move from one place to the other. At the local level, if Sierra Vista had different rules for taxation and Benson had different rules for taxation, you could get in an inequitable position where they can't keep up, or it creates a system where one city is stymied while the other can flourish. So as we talk about some horizontal inequities between or among the cities within the state. So when we go back and talk about our Dillon rule, it's good to have that standardization. All right, so this is a class about budgets, right? So what does that mean? Here's the same chart, except I put the legislative, executive, and judicial branches in. We all remember civics in high school, and we talked about the checks and balances, right? The executive does certain things, the legislative does certain things, the judicial does certain things. This is a very just condensed version of that, and I wanted to point out that when you look at the federal government, Congress passes the budget, the state passes the budget, and then federal level, after Congress passes that budget, the executive, the president's branch, executes the budget. When our state legislature passes the budget, the governor's office executes that budget. It's important to note at the local level that changes, where your legislature, our board of supervisors, city council, they pass the budget, but they don't put it together, they don't create it, they don't have a budget office like the state joint legislative budget committee. That is a budget office that puts the budget together for the state and then sends it to the governor's office. Here at the local level, the budget is put together by the budget manager, budget team, me, and I work for the executive branch. So what you see is there's a big shift at your local level of who creates the budget. So when we talk about federal fiscalism and this being a budget class, this is where the budget comes into play. So our budget is normally done at the legislative level, but at the local level, it's at the executive. Okay, so we're almost there, laying the foundation of what gives us authority to exist as a city, what gives us authority to exist as a county, to tax, to create a budget. So we got to get a little bit into local government economics. And we may remember this from Economics 101. Are different types of goods. There's 4 main types of goods and 2 categories. So just to go over them on the top there, excludable and non-excludable. An excludable good is something that you can exclude people from using, and that is with money. So if you want a car or a house or a food, you pay for it. So you pay for the good, you get it. A non-excludable good is something that anybody can use, no matter if you pay for it or not. So that could be something like grazing land or fishing rights or natural resources. On the left, there's 2 rows there, the rival and non-rival. And what those are things, a rival good is limited, meaning that if one person has it and then a second person has it, there's only so much to go around. It's not enough for everybody. What a non-rival good is, it's non-rivalless, it's we would say unlimited. So one person has it or 100 people has it. It doesn't matter, it doesn't diminish the quality. And again, these are a spectrum and these are examples, so it could be easy to come up with, well, what about this good or that good? Just bear with me as the examples here. So top left, we have our private goods. They're excludable, meaning you have to pay for it, and there's only so much of it. Cars, house, food. That is where the market, our commercial capitalist market, produces goods because they can charge for it and they're scarce. There's only so many of them. The upper right, common goods. They're non-excludable, meaning anybody can use it, but it's also limited. So that's something we would call the tragedy of the commons, that type of good. For those of you to expound on that, tragedy of the commons is the age-old anecdote where you have, a big grazing land and everybody puts all their cows on it all the time. Well, since there's no ownership of it, there's no management of it, the tragedy is that the cows overgraze and that grazing land doesn't come back. So this type of common good is a natural resource. Fishing rights in the ocean, grazing land, timber. And we also have what we call a free rider problem where anybody can come and get it, not pay for it, but there's only so much of it. And because of this, it's underproduced by the market. Our capitalist market doesn't really produce enough of these goods because they can't charge for it. Next, bottom left, your common resources. So these are things you have to pay for, but they're unlimited. So why would you pay for something if it's unlimited? Well, that comes down to they make it artificially scarce or a natural monopoly. So if you think about satellite radio, FM radio, doesn't matter how many people are dialed in, but you have to pay for it somehow. You have to buy the radio, or satellite radio, you have to pay for the subscription. So it's not scarce, but they're making it scarce by creating a price for it. And this is also where you would see like a monopoly, like again, this is a spectrum. It's not a hard and fast rule, a utility. So we've got a couple of power plants here in town. That's not a limiting factor in population growth. So really the population could grow for quite some time with only one power provider. Again, this is a spectrum, not hard and fast. So just think, if there's a natural monopoly, like certain areas have power production or this or that, you pay for it, but there's almost such an abundance of it's not really limited. So what do we do as a local government? What type of goods do we produce? What do we budget for? What do we tax for? Those are public goods. It's things that anybody can use, and it's almost unlimited. So if you're in Cochise County, everybody gets public safety, whether you pay for it or not. If you call 911, someone's going to come. National defense. If you're in the United States, everybody gets national defense. Public parks. If you live in Cochise County, there's parks, everybody gets to go to the parks. And although they're not unlimited, there's such an abundance of it that it doesn't really matter how many people come to the park. Again, that's a spectrum. So who produces public goods? Well, the market doesn't, because they can't make money off of it. That's just the way the market operates. So if we can't make money off of it, why would we produce it? So that's where local governments, provided the authority to exist and operate by the U.S. Constitution, we come in and produce public goods. So how do we produce this? Do we just produce it out of nowhere? Well, this is where we get to tax. And we'll probably have a class on theory of taxation as well. So we're going to kick it back to high school again in Econ 101 and talk about supply and demand. So what's it all mean? If we look at our red, let me get my thing here. Okay, our red is the demand. There we go. And any of our astute math people out there I want to note that your y-axis here, the price, is the independent variable, and your x-axis, the quantity, is your dependent variable. So, basic economics. As the price goes up, the people buy less quantity. Price goes up, people buy less. We get that. Price up, quantity goes down. Supply is what the market produces. So as the price goes up, there's more money in that industry. That's an arrow, bear with me here. As the price goes up, and there's more money in that industry, the quantity produced will go up. So there's an equilibrium where the amount of demand meets the amount of supply. And that's what we call the equilibrium, or the ideal price and the ideal quantity for a market. Okay, so how does local government come in here and extract taxes? What we do is we extract a tax. And I'm going to try, I've got a couple graphs on this, so let me know which one works better, but I think we'll get the point here. Okay, so what does a tax do? A tax increases the price, right? So when you increase the price, what happens to the demand? Where'd I go here? It goes down. Tax increases price, demand goes down. So what happens when you execute that tax? It increases the price and the supplies go down. So what we have here is this little black triangle, and it shifts our demand, our position on the demand curve further up and out. And that black is not the tax we've raised. That black triangle is what we call dead waste loss. That is the loss in the market, the transactions not being made because of the tax. So that is a damage to the market based on the tax. So this next chart will be a little bit better, so do let me know. Okay, I used an example, and I hope my wife's not on the line here. Every time I drive up 92 and I go past the dealership, I see those new Jeep Gladiators. Well, those are sweet. Want one. Okay, what's the price? $40,000. And I'm just going to make an example. So let's say I survey 100 people, and they all say at $40,000, I'll buy the Jeep. Okay. But when you add the tax to that, it increases the price to $48,000. So what you have is, okay, let's say, so we'll go up bit by bit. $40,000, 100 people want the vehicle. At $42,000, only 96 people want the vehicle because that was the most they could afford. At $46,000, maybe it goes on to 92 people only want the vehicle because those 8 people, the difference between $40,000 and $46,000 is too much. And then when we get to $48,000, only 90 people want the vehicle. So what by implementing a tax going from $40,000 to $48,000, our demand went from 100 to 90. So that means that by implementing a tax, we've hurt or damaged the dealership by reducing their sales by 10. Again, these are figurative, that don't go tell them that there's an $8,000 price on that Jeep. It's just an example. So this shows here, I think this is a better graph, so I'm glad I brought this up. So right here, this is our $40,000. When you buy that for $48,000, the buyer pays 48. The seller receives 40. That 8 is the tax revenue, right? But right here is the tax wedge that the government drives into the economy and damages the economy. And what happens? The economy is hurt. This area right here are those 10 people that said, I wanted the Jeep at 40, but not 48. So to generate this tax wedge in revenue, we have to hurt the market by shifting our supply and demand curves and generating that. So why do we do this? So let's go back to the goods. The private market isn't going to produce public goods, but we need public goods. So what happens is we say, as a people and a government, we are going to, unfortunately, in a concerted and calculated way, inflict a punishment on the economy to extract tax revenue to provide public goods. So again, here we are. We need these public goods. The economy doesn't provide them, so we need to inflict this punishment through taxation and deadweight loss to the economy to generate the tax revenue to pay for our goods and services that nobody else will provide. Okay, so I think I need a sip of coffee after that one. Let's see if we have any questions. No, I guess this is crystal clear. Okay. Externalities. So when we talk about government economics and the private sector working together, talk about an externality. So what is an externality? It's an effect felt by a third party that's not involved in the transaction or production of goods or services. So what's that mean? So, great example, Bisbee mining town, they had a smelter. There was pollution from the smelter. It's a negative externality that affected people in the city. This is 100 years ago, right? But when I lived in Bisbee in 2010, I got a knock at the door, and it was the guys from Freeport McMoran going, "We're replacing your front lawn." I go, "What are you talking about?" I goes, "Well, like 100 years ago, there was a smelter, and there's some heavy metals in your lawn." I go, "Oh, okay." He goes, "So we're going to voluntarily replace your lawn." So that's a negative externality that the company is now making right. Another one, we talk about the ground table water. There's been a series of talks at the beginning of the year about water in Wilcox. So what happens when the dairies punch a well below the private wells, and then the private wells run dry? That's a negative externality. The private wells are the third party that are being negatively affected by a commercial enterprise. Say home values. You know, it's a house on your street they don't take care of, and there's weeds, and it looks like it just doesn't look nice. It could bring down home values. So the negative externality is the appearance and home valuations of the neighborhood. So what do we do to negative externalities? We can tax it, can regulate it. So how would that look? So let's look at the Bisbee mining smelter. Instead of waiting for the mine to replace people's front lawns 100 years later, 4 generations, Bisbee could have, if the EPA existed or the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality existed 100 years ago, they could have said, "Oh, okay, Bisbee, the mine, you're going to open a smelter." Well, the city of Bisbee said, "Well, according to our environmental analysis, you're going to dump heavy metals in everybody's lawn. So, just to throw some numbers out there, for every whatever 10 pounds of metals you smelt, you got to pay $10 to the city of Bisbee." And then with that $10, they put that back into the community with by replacing front lawns as it happens. So that's an example of how you would apply, local government economic concept of externalities to local governments and commercial enterprise in that relationship. Ground table water. I know the oldest pastime in Arizona is arguing about water. Well, let's just throw some ideas out. I'm not advocating for these. Okay, Wilcox, the dairies are punching wells in deeper than the private well. So what are some thoughts or examples of how that negative externality could be taxed or regulated? Could the state tax every well below a certain depth to protect the water table? Sure, and then put that money towards grants for private well owners to dig their wells deeper? Sure. Could they regulate it? Could they say, no well anywhere goes past 1,000 feet? Sure, they could do that. Obviously, there'd be some heated discussions about that, some aggressive negotiations. But these are examples of how this policy is formed, or how policies like this are formed. Okay, positive externalities. It's not all bad. Education, research and development, Firewise, again, home values. So education. I don't have any kids. I went to college 15 years ago. I don't go to Cochise College. I love Cochise College, but I pay Cochise College tax. So could I argue, I don't use your service, why are you charging me? Well, Cochise College provides an educated workforce for the community. Could you imagine Sierra Vista or Douglas or our whole county if there was no college teaching people how to work on cars or work on airplanes or work on drones? That'd be horrible. What about Buena High? I don't have a teenager in high school, but could you imagine what the parks would look like if kids didn't have some place to go? There'd be broken beer bottles everywhere. So it's a positive externality having children and young adults and all adults educated. What about a Firewise program or home values? So in Old Bisbee, they've got, I believe, a Firewise program. Well, it may not be every house or property there, but it's still good. So if 1/3 of the homes in Bisbee has what's called xeriscaping and they clean the trees and all that jazz, well, it's good for the whole city. Everybody in Bisbee benefits from a certain portion of the city's having more fire defensible properties. And again, home values, you move to a neighborhood and you paint your house, put a new roof on, and guy across the street does the same thing. Next thing you know, if half the neighborhood did that stuff, 100% of the neighborhood improves. So how do we incentivize these types of positive externalities? We subsidize it, or we help pay for it, or we tax it. Cochise College has a property tax that every single property owner in the county pays for because it's a good thing. Research and development. Our state universities are paid for partially with state tax dollars because it's a good thing. Firewise programs, there's grants from the government. Home values. Or a good example is in Old Bisbee, they have the design review board that basically says any building in Old Bisbee needs to adhere to a certain historic design. So these rules or regulations they've applied to Old Bisbee homes keeps that Old Bisbee home or that Old Bisbee charm. Could you imagine what Old Bisbee would look like if starting in the 80s, every building there was like a Soviet style block apartment? It would look horrible. No one would want to visit. No one would want to go. So what they regulated to keep this positive externality of cool looking facades going. Okay, so it's pretty deep here with the local government economics, and we've been dancing around the budget. So I'm going to cut everybody some slack here, and we're not going to go too much longer. So we've talked about federalism, push and pull at the federal government and the state level, local level. Who does what? Who budgets? What branch of the government budgets? When we budget, what are we budgeting for? To provide goods. Talk about what type of goods. Public goods, because no one else provides them. What's the cost to the market of taxation getting those goods? So right now, let's bring it all home and just talk about a budget. What is a budget? It's a guess, it's a plan, it's a promise, it's a law. Well, I put the budget together, I'll tell you what, it's a real good guess. I can tell you that this year, I think we're going to have 890 employees. We're going to spend $30 million on payroll, another $13 million on benefits, retirement, health insurance. I'm guessing that our property taxes are going to be about $25 million. And with all the economic uncertainty, I'm going to guess that our state shared sales tax is going to drop $1 million and our local sales tax is probably going to drop $500,000. Well, they're well-educated guesses based on as much data as I can scrounge up, but it's not written in stone. It's the best guess that myself and the finance director and the county administrator and the county supervisors association and the Department of Revenue that we can all put together. It's gonna be the best guess we can make. Okay, so it's a guess. Is it a plan? Yeah, I'm planning on Cochise County General Fund spending $30 million on salaries and $13 million on benefits, $5 million on operating, $2 million on capital, $500,000 to keep the lights on. That's my plan. That's our plan. Is it a promise? Yeah, you sure bet it's a promise to the taxpayer because we've knowingly gone into the economy and hurt it to extract tax revenue. We've hurt private citizens by taxing their property. So this is us saying, this is our promise to you. We took this money from you, we hurt the economy, but we promise we're only going to spend $65 million, and we're going to promise to you that we're only going to spend it on these things. So when you open that budget book, you're going to go, okay, well, I know the county attorney spends this, finance spends this, HR spends this. So it's an accountability. So yeah, it's a promise to the taxpayer as well. Is it law? Yeah. So when the Board of Supervisors or City Council passes that budget, whether it be ordinance or resolution, that's the law. Not even Dan and his great budget authority can go, well, you know, I think I'm going to move $1 million from salary to operating. No. Or I'm going to move $500,000 from public works over to HR. No, I can't do that because the budget is low. So what's the budget? It's a guess. It's a plan. It's a promise. And it's law. All right, let's send it on that, huh? Okay. Just a couple notes that if you want to see the county's budget documents, just go to the county website. You can see here, it's cochise.az.gov. You can Google it, it pops up. Home, department, finance, annual county budgets. You'll see the budget history for the last few years, and the last 3 are the detailed ones. So we'll be talking about them, but if you're just so enthralled with this and want to do some reading before next week, that's the place. Okay. Thank you. I feel like I've just been talking for 50 minutes straight, but it was good. Any questions? I'm going to stay on here for as long as everybody wants to. Use the Q&A, ask some questions, and I'll wait for them to pour in. What else I got? Next week, I'm going to publish the schedule of topics for every week, but next week we've got the deputy director from the JLBC on, and we're going to be talking about budget. After he comes on talking about the state budget, I'll be talking about budget types, budget history, and the budget adoption and development process. All right, I'll wait for the questions to come in, and you guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, a couple questions about the PowerPoint. I'll get that posted. I'll get with IT and post the PowerPoints probably next to the link or something. So we'll get that taken care of. So the slides, I have not posted them yet. So thank you for that. I will get them posted before every talk, and we'll get the first ones posted there on the webpage as well. Not a lot of questions yet. It must have been just so crystal clear. So I will be able to post the presentation, and this has been recorded, so I'll see if I can get the recording up on the website as well. Lots of good comments. I'll make sure I post those and then dismiss all the bad ones. Thank you. Maybe I should just make this an hour because I don't know if I could talk for another 30 minutes. All right, there's a few people still here, but I don't have any questions, so I think I'm just going to call it. Thank you guys so much for joining, and I'll see you next time.